am. I don't want any trouble. I got 5 chickens. I don't want any LED on them. None. Scan my shirt 5 times, buddy. 5 times.
I need the Costco card.
That's a regular credit card.
I need the Costco card.
Okay, hold on. I got one.
I don't know.
Here you go. I don't want to charge it on this card. I want to put it on this card. Scan it.
I think he's a TikToker. I think he's a TikToker.
Scan it.
I did.
Okay. Done.
Huh. What does that guy know that we don't? And is there some kind of like laser scan conspiracy that we don't know anything about? Those are the questions that I demand answers to. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. My name is Luke Radowski here of WeAreChange.org, and there's a lot of absolutely wild and weird news to get into today. As of course, domestically, a lot of college campuses are up in upheaval, as it looks like there's a lot of very interesting demonstrations happening right now that a lot of people are saying are going to be leading to a threat against democracy and freedom here inside of the United States. All of this as your tax dollars are literally paying for the expansion of an international global conflict that looks like it has absolutely no end in sight. We're going to be talking about that plus all the latest news here on this independent media broadcast. If you like the shirt that I'm wearing, you could get it on thebestpoliticalshirts.com. And the clip that we played in the beginning of this broadcast is, I don't know who, it was just released on social media. It's going viral, highlighting a Costco shopper that doesn't want his chickens scanned by LED lasers, and literally created a t-shirt where those chickens could be scanned on his shirt. What's going on here? I don't know. I'm perplexed. I'm left with a lot of questions. I want answers to those questions. Will we get them? Probably not. As of course, this could be another form of engagement farming, creating bewildering content, making people share it, question it, and of course, starting conversations that feed the algorithm that ever so keeps running our lives and could be running our lives even more, especially when it comes to predictive programming, especially when it comes to shaping the minds of the youth of this country that are really not happy and are launching some significant protests all throughout the United States. We're going to be talking about that topic in a little bit, as of course, a lot of the young people are frustrated because of the lack of economic opportunities for them, since, of course, you know, we have a U.S. Federal Reserve banking system that literally prints money out of thin air, devaluing it at the same time as they're doing a spending spree in Congress for foreign wars and conflicts. As domestically, the situation financially is not good for everyone. As today, we're finding out that major U.S. banks just shut down a total of 36 branches in just 1 week in the United States. This as inflation is absolutely wreaking havoc on middle-class, blue-collar Americans that are told to pay for illegal immigration and foreign conflicts internationally. But don't worry, the U.S. federal government has your back, as now they're banning a social media platform that is connected with the Chinese government, as the TikTok ban was just passed by the House of Representatives, as the U.S. intelligentsia demands total control of information here domestically inside of the United States, and slowly and surely they're making sure that their grips of control cannot be questioned internationally by other foreign governments and their interests. This as internationally the situation is not all right, as conflicts are, of course, expanding in the Middle East, inside of Europe, and also in Asia, as a lot of people are keeping their eyes on Taiwan, but also North Korea, that just launched their first ever nuclear trigger drill, simulating a nuclear weapon counterattack. This as in Europe. Poland now is also making declarative statements that they want to host nuclear weapons inside of their country, mainly to push back against Russia, that today is being accused of launching cyber attacks against a Texas's town water tower that could have potentially disrupted U.S. drinking water systems, as of course Iran was also pointed at as a potential culprit here, so was China. This as internationally, it's important to note here that there's a lot of espionage, there's a lot of hacking, there's a lot of cyber warfare that many times is spoofed, many times is engineered, many times could be false flagged to make it look like it was another country. This as unconventional warfare is becoming the new norm, in an ever so hostile world where the only thing that is promised is, of course, the continuation of more conflict, as we're getting new images on the Polish border, allegedly highlighting a lot of Ukrainian men that are trying to make their way through it. Ever since the United States declared that it will be giving over $60+ billion to the Ukrainians to, of course, continue their larger proxy conflict against Russia. As information is key in this day and age, and that's why we can't recommend enough that you guys sign up to lookunfiltered.com. If you haven't signed up yet, what are you waiting for? Click the link down in the description right now as we do some really cool, awesome things for our members, including a special broadcast right after this one that is only going to be available for paying members. Also, we are doing another nature hike this Sunday, April 28th, 1 p.m. local time in Austin, Texas. As of course, the day before, we are going to be on stage with Alex Jones at the Mind Festival, which you can now use promo code Luke and get a significant discount off of your tickets. See you soon in Austin. As we also wanted to remind you guys not just to sign up to lookunfiltered.com, but also check out saveirishman.com. I have a best pal, and we're doing a give, send, go. Check it out. saveirishman.com, as it's important to help best buddies out there. And all of this, as of course, there looks like there's a lot of upheaval on college campuses all throughout the United States that recently started with what looks like a sit-in at Columbia University that has sparked a lot of civil disobedience, where many students now have been arrested for protesting the current conflict inside of the Middle East. This, as today CBS News is reporting that these protesters are leaving college campuses on edge here, as these left-wing protests have been fairly significant, as they even enacted a lot of the staff and facility members of these college campuses to participate in their larger protests, where these people are literally taking out tents and occupying territories within campuses in order to protest the United States' involvement in financing the larger conflict inside of the Middle East right now. And as you can see from these images on screen, there's a lot of tents. There's a lot of people participating in these protests that are gaining more and more attention and national news headlines, as The Guardian is also reporting that over a dozen people have been arrested at Yale and NYU, as these protests are also spreading and growing in large numbers. This as some police officers had to fight their way through protests in order to get rid of these encampments, as today Columbia University just literally canceled in-person classes in response to this larger protest movement that originally looks like started on their campuses. The Daily Mail is reporting that there's campus chaos that now just also spread to California, as some students have barricaded themselves into the entrance of one of the school buildings as they are demanding a full-on conversation about the United States' role and involvement in this larger foreign proxy conflict that is absolutely very inconvenient to the Biden administration, that is losing a lot of their young voters, predominantly because of their support of this conflict in the Middle East that these students are currently protesting right now. This, as a lot of people are asking themselves, why are we seeing these protests at some of the most expensive, prestigious universities all throughout the United States, as MIT, NYU, Vanderbilt University, Washington University, UNC Chapel Hill, and many others are now participating in these protests that are gaining some significant traction and absolutely starting some very interesting conversations, as they have already disrupted classrooms inside of Columbia that are still canceled until the end of the semester, as now students are forced to remote learning, as some parents are demanding a refund of the nearly $70,000 a year in tuition fees that they pay for this predominantly left-wing bastion of institutionalized learning that has led the charge in a lot of these protests. Now, so far from all of these reports, it looks like no one was seriously hurt or injured during these protests. There are some videos showing some individuals being blocked from walking, and you know, say what you may about that. It's inconvenient, but there's a lot of ethos here of this protest movement, very similar to, of course, Occupy Wall Street, that also started in New York City, spread all throughout the United States, and automatically has garnered a lot of outcry from the establishment corporate media, as now the situation is a little bit mixed and it's a little bit more complex than, of course, Occupy Wall Street, that originally had a lot of people from the left and the right representing anti-establishment voices that, of course, were really tired about the larger financial inequalities in our society. Slowly and surely, Occupy Wall Street became more of a left-leaning kind of demonstration, and in some people's opinions, and in my own too, was essentially hijacked by the far left, that ultimately led it to its demise after police officers, of course, destroyed many of their encampments. Now, what's happening here with this one? Well, it's a little bit different of a situation, as, of course, you do have some outcry about it. There's footage of some protesters lighting a flare, and some media organizations are making a big deal out of it, but it's literally just a flare. Yeah, the guy has a flare. Okay. Yep. Some media organizations are criticizing the affluence of these kind of protesters, calling them hyper-privileged, detailing their $12 croissants and vegan and gluten-free homemade goods that they're providing to the protesters that are camping out inside of Columbia University. As recently, even Alec Baldwin was confronted with these specific protesters, which he literally decided to respond to by smacking a camera out of a woman's hands who was being rude and confrontational to him. Now, on the flip side of all of this, there's also, I think, larger nuanced conversations that need to happen here about all foreign conflicts, not just the one happening inside of the Middle East, as I think it's fair to assess here that a lot of these protesters that are against the war in the Middle East are pretty much for the war inside of Europe. And we've seen that kind of unprincipled stance by a lot of these particular individuals. I don't mean to group in, because there's probably some individuals that are all anti-war and are a part of these protests, but it is fair to say that there is a lot of selective outrage out there, and a lot of it is being manipulated, not just by social media algorithms, but also, of course, professors at universities that are creating what some people have described a woke, quote, mind virus akin to the larger Cultural Revolution that we have seen happen in places like China before. Now, is that exactly what's happening here? Well, Mao Zedong did, of course, rise to power and use universities as a way to, of course, establish his dominance and hegemony over the local populations. And are these young people being used and manipulated by some kind of larger outside force that is pulling their strings for their own personal benefit? Well, I think right now in this current social media day and age, and the lack of principles and virtues, I think that's a real reality here, and something that is a conversation that at least is worth having. This, as of course other deep state intelligence agency connected individuals like Bill Barr just recently came out today on Fox News and said that the real threat to democracy is, quote, the far left. This as Trump, the former president of the United States who appointed Bill Barr, just came out and is blaming Joe Biden for these protesters that he describes that are, quote, trying to rip down colleges all throughout the United States, as he has called these demonstrators a, quote, disgrace to our country, and that the current president of the United States is responsible for them. All of this as Bill Barr also just announced that he will be backing Donald Trump in this presidential election because even though he double-crossed him, he still sees the left as a bigger threat and danger here. This as Donald Trump is still in court today, where prosecutors are accusing him of violating a gag order 11 times, as a judge today is hearing requests to hold Donald Trump in contempt of court for his larger social media posts. Now, as this trial goes on, it is clear that the divide between the left and right is becoming very clear, very present, and how do we get larger nuance here to really understand what's really going on here? Well, in my opinion, you got to question everything. As it's also important to note here that the more that the right also attacks these protesters, the more they become prominent. The more that the left attacks Donald Trump, the more he also becomes prominent as well. Is this protest like the Occupy Wall Street movement? No, absolutely not. Is it using techniques that Occupy Wall Street used before? Yes. Are these students a larger threat to democracy? Well, let's start that conversation down in the description below. So far, personally, I don't think so as of yet, but there is something to worry about, especially when it comes to the indoctrination of children and the larger weaponization of a disassociated youth that doesn't have any kind of larger economic options out there for themselves or their future. So yes, there is a major problem that young people are facing more and more, especially when it comes to a mental health crisis, especially when it comes to a crisis dealing with their own physical and mental health. But Is that all being done on purpose? Will these people be weaponized and used against you sometime in the future? Well, probably. That's just my take on it. It's a little complex. It's a little nuanced. If you appreciate it, if you like it, share it with your friends and family members. We appreciate you guys very much. Check out saveirishman.com. I love you guys. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys subscribing to lukeunfiltered.com, where the conversation continues about a very interesting social media post from an online account that looks like that they're threatening some of these protesters. What's the larger truth here? Well, that conversation continues all on lukeunfiltered.com. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, and this is why I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on wearechange.org. See you on the nature hike this Sunday.